Let's talk about generative AI's real ROI, whether the technology is really taking jobs, and how good data is the key to it all. We're joined today by Mohammed Alam, the head of product and engineering at SAP, and a member of the company's executive board, in a conversation brought to you by SAP. Mohammed, welcome. Great to see you again.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks for having me.
So let's start. Why don't we go right to the heavy stuff? There's been so much conversation and speculation about whether generative artificial intelligence is going to lead to job loss. And you and I have spoken recently about this topic, and you brought up some really interesting data to me. Something along the lines of, I'll start and then toss it over to you, something along the lines of that you have 35 to 40,000 people working underneath you, but capacity for 200,000 people. To me, this is just this is the key to it all, right? Which is that if we think that AI will just take jobs and people will be satisfied with what they're doing today, they're missing half of the other picture, or the other half of the picture, which is that there's so much room to do more work that people like yourself need. So talk a little bit about sort of the staffing that you have today and how AI, if it's able to automate a lot of work, would change that picture.
Yeah, no, sounds good. And I think it's a very popular question, Alex, as you can imagine, not just because now you're asking it as well, but it's a question I get internally quite a bit because there's a lot of, what I'd call it sort of noise, feedback, opinions out in the system in terms of what is it going to lead to, particularly in the software development space. Because if you think about one industry that generative AI deeply impact, it is software development, where there is a potential for significant uplift from an efficiency, from an automation perspective, than how work gets done today. And we're not going to be unique in terms of it not impacting us from an SAP perspective. But really, the way I think about it and the way it's playing out for us even this year, where we have actually rolled out tools too broadly. Our 35, 40,000 developers, as you pointed out earlier, that is already giving significant efficiency in terms of development, in terms of execution, engineering systems, pipeline management that we do internally. But what that hasn't led to for us is job reduction. I think from the point that I made when we had this the fireside chat is, if I look at our backlogs are pretty massive. Like this kinds of systems that we build from an SAP perspective, from a front office perspective, from finance, from supply chain and others, that the changes that are happening in the industries are massive, and we need to be able to both keep up and innovate in them. So our product teams have a lot to go do. So if we can find efficiency, it's about how we can deliver more innovation faster. Our backlogs, again, are to some extent never ending, and the needs of customers continue to increase. So what we look at from a generative AI perspective is, how do we then use the technology that's out there to accelerate the innovation? And the way I talk about it with my team is, listen, we are looking for not just the 10% improvements, the 20% improvement. We're looking for 5x, 10x improvement, because what we believe today is there is tech out there that can enable all roles in a software development lifecycle, from PM, from developer, from QA, from UA, and others, to be able to drive significant efficiency. And with that, what we're looking to go do is now not just operate at the throughput of 40,000 people, but operate at the throughput of 5x, of 200,000 effective staff, to deliver even more innovation for our customers. And we might even, honestly, in 26, barring any unforeseen external circumstances, even grow a little to be able to keep pace with the innovation that our customers are looking for. So that is our point of view, which I believe is aligned with sort of what we're seeing in our customer channel, if you will. Now, what that doesn't mean is, hey, some of the roles won't change, some of kind of how we allocate capacity won't change. So we'll probably see some shifts within which roles are invested in more, what's the skill set and the capability of the role, where do we sort of bring the roles in. So we'll see some adjustments, but in aggregate, we expect us to actually grow modestly, not now significantly, because we think we can drive significant efficiencies and acceleration through the use of the tech that's out there.
And I have so much I want to speak with you about. I want to speak to you about how those roles might change, and of course, getting to AI ROI. But I think that this is such an important point, and there have been a few people that have made it as clearly as you have in my conversations with folks. And I'm saying this like not as an AI booster or as an unbridled optimist. I think it's just important to get to the truth of the matter. which is exactly what you're saying. If you were, and this is sort of why these conversations about automation when it comes to AI are so incomplete. If you were to stop and just say, all right, we're going to automate as much work as we can, not really build out the roadmap and just focus on profitability, I imagine for someone like yourself, like the short-term numbers, might look better. Like, oh, look at our division, we're highly profitable. But in the way that you're talking about the fact that we have this fast-moving economy, it's just not a winning strategy, right? To just say, all right, let's just automate and be more profitable, as opposed to keep up with what's
and it's got a
next.
competitive flavor too, right, Alex? I mean, what I tell my team is if I look at, our portfolio is pretty wide, but if you sort of go to one solution area or within one solution area, a single product, you can argue we could get to teams of 1,000 or 2,000 even that are focused on one product area. And I talk to these teams and I say, hey, listen, in today's world with the tech that's out there, a 200% startup can actually operate at the throughput of what we operate with 2,000 or 1,000. Like, where we sort of maintain and sustain our advantage is if we take our 2,000 and now operate at the pace of 8,000. Now that's going to be hard for somebody to go do with 50 or 100 people. So for us, it's as much about, hey, keeping the staff, maybe even growing it. So the pace of innovation is just going to be hard to match with anybody that comes up now with some new tools, generative coding, generative development, and say, hey, now we've got this app and that app. But we need to be able to keep that same distance from an innovation throughput perspective, if that makes sense.
It makes total sense. And this is what I always think about conversations like this when I see headlines that say, like, as generative AI, takes off, there's job loss. It's like there may be a correlation, but very few headlines actually have causation. And I appreciate you bringing this, this really important data point because it really is good to get clear examples of the fact that, like, yes, there's this powerful technology, but no, we're actually looking to hire. It reminds me of the Mayo Clinic, which they have this big AI program. Their head of AI is a radiologist. And of course, years back, we all heard that AI can read scans and therefore we're not going to need radiologists anymore. The head of a radiologist runs this AI program within the Mayo Clinic. They have 11 AI models running within that division, and they still can't hire enough radiologists. Yeah. I think that we're just, at least in the short term, that just seems to be what we're going to see. So, but I do want to, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think there's two things here. One is, listen, there is a lot of, because you take on one hand what we just discussed, right? And then you sort of on the other hand look at all the news that comes out from tech companies about reductions and restructuring, and then how do you reconcile the two? Because in some cases, what you'll hear about is, hey, some of this is related to AI. Some will actually go on to clarify, no, it's not really about AI. We're doing this because we had some structural issues. But I do think, like, if you decompose some of that, it's not as much about the capacity that you need is what's going away. It's maybe the needs are shifting, as we discussed earlier, the roles and so forth. But in some cases, they're also fixing things that were just things that needed to be fixed pre-AI. They're just fixing it post-AI. And it's sort of a bit of because it's happening post-AI, AI gets an effect. Now, and this phenomenon that we're discussing, I think, obviously, is for software development. As you take it into different functions like finance, customer service, and others, the impact levels are different as well. I think this Mayo example is a great one, too, that it's a different industry. But even there, the application of AI, given how much the business is growing and how much the need is there, doesn't necessarily lead to a capacity reduction, but it allows you to scale even more.
And we've danced around it a bit, or you've mentioned it a couple of times, that roles are going to change. And you're in a very interesting position in this economy and in the business world because you run both a product and engineering team within SAP. And I'm curious what you think the future of these different teams is going to be. Are they going to become closer together, or is product going to effectively subsume engineering? Because everybody's talking about how it's become so much easier to code and people are vibe coding. And it used to be the product team would maybe steer the way that the engineers build something. And now, from what I'm hearing, product leaders, even CEOs, are showing up to engineers with working prototypes that they've built in things like Replit and saying, here, improve this, or it should work like this. So how do you think that the interplay of those two groups is going to look like?
One thing I try not to do, Alex, and it might be slightly disappointing to use. I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't try not to predict the future. But I will tell you.
How about now? Yeah, let's hear it.
How about now? So what we are trying to do is we're trying to push the envelope in any direction possible to be able to really think about how the world will change. And I will tell you, as we discussed, if you look at the role of a product manager, I think gone are the days where a product manager is just writing a spec and sort of giving a set of instructions or requirements for somebody else to go build. Like a product manager necessarily now can be empowered to generate an app and get it to 40, 50, in some cases, depending on how good the models are. If you have some fine-tuned models, 70, 80%, and then hand over in collaboration to a set of senior engineers now that take it to the last mile, if you will, exactly the same example that you give with CEOs generating apps on themselves, if you will. And as part of that process, sort of core set of design and user research constructs are built in. And of course, all the fundamentals and the foundations of test automation, as well as documentation sort of comes out of it as well. So I think we are actually at SAP piloting many different models. So across our many different product areas, we have a bunch of what we call front runner teams that we've given this freedom to innovate on their own. So we're not pushing down a point of view top down to say, hey, thou shall have this role that does this function and these engineers and this many UA and QA, if you will. What we're saying is, listen, here's a set of smart people. You can pick any tool that you want in the market. We'll obviously take it through the right privacy and security scans and things like that as well that our customers expect of us. But then you can look at what model works. And we're seeing some amazingly successful stories where teams are coming back and in some ways are slightly apologetic. They say, hey, listen, we use tools this and this, and we were 7x better than what we delivered in the last sprint. I'm like, well, but then why are you so sad? They're like, but we spend a lot of time learning. We think in the next sprint we're going to be 12x better, if you will, from that perspective. So if you look at that as a potential, another team, as part of these frontrunner teams, came and said, hey, we delivered almost all of what we did in the last quarter in this last 2-week sprint. And that is phenomenal acceleration, if you will. And that gives me a lot of hope that as you sort of empower these smart teams, I think we'll start seeing some trends, and the trends and the patterns are going to be different by the state of where a product is, the life cycle of where a product is. If you're building a new product, I think there's a lot more runway to be able to sort of go leverage and generate the app. If it's an existing app that you're adding or fixing a bug in, it's a bit different. So I think what we're going to see is different patterns evolve that'll lead to different both team mixes and the kinds of evolution each role can have, if you will. But we're seeing some really exciting results from the experiments that we're running.
It's very interesting that you've seen it within teams. Like I have this belief philosophy that we're going to see maybe the age of an empowered individual, right? An individual today can do much more than they were able to do previously. I was working on this story about Anthropic and speaking with people using their coding tools. And one engineer told me that they had like Claude Code running 7 different agents and then was like checking their work and coordinating. And you could never really do that as just one person previously, but now you can orchestrate in a way. So for me, it was always like we're going to see much more enhanced productivity among motivated individuals that really learn these tools. But what you're saying is something maybe even further, which is now that, if you have groups that really learn how to use them, they can push forward too.
And they'll help define the needs and the roles that need to be played, right? Like how the role of a PM maybe will shift from being a product manager to a product builder. And then there's a senior engineering team that sort of takes it to the line. And then, maybe the role of a single engineer wouldn't exist because everybody would need to, by definition, be an engineering manager. Even if they don't have any humans reporting to them, as you said, they'll have a lot of agents working for them. And then you need to have the same skill set to be able to understand the output of those agents and how can you build upon them. So I do think some of these shifts are pretty evident already, like the shifts in product manager, how I think every engineer would need to learn the skills of being an engineering manager because you'll have a set of agents, if not humans, working with you to be able to sort of deal with code that from a size and a scale perspective is exponential compared to what you were able to go do with just yourself or a set of humans underneath you.
Fascinating. And let's get to the ROI question. This is a great lead in because clearly there's an ROI with coders. Like the Claude coder that I was talking about previously was spending like $200 a month and running 7 agents in parallel. So he was getting his money's worth on AI. But there is this debate about whether AI is landing an ROI to businesses that are using it. In fact, there's like two dueling studies that I love to cite. MIT said 95% of companies who've built AI pilots or products are not seeing an ROI. And then Wharton said 74% of businesses using generative AI are seeing an ROI. So we'll talk about ways to get better ROI from these tools. But first of all, I'm curious to hear your perspective. Which one of those studies was closer to the truth? Not asking you to agree completely to either one, but who has the right idea and which one might have been a little bit off?
So I think from my perspective, it's a bit nuanced, right? I think it depends on both the use case and the function you're talking about. So if you clearly take software development at SAP, you can argue sort of I'm running the supply chain function of a software development organization. So for me, our supply chain, because of some of the tools that exist, we're definitely seeing value that's out there. We're still seeing a lot of untapped value, while I think we're generally within 10 to 20% even better already with the tools we've rolled out, with the potential of what we just discussed a few minutes ago. I think that the potential is multiples of what we deliver today from a throughput perspective. So I think in this space, it works. Now, if you change domain, maybe get into finance or just really hardcore supply chain, if you will, or front office and others, then you get by industry into a mixed place. And our point of view from SAP in here is very simple as well. And we tried to articulate it at our couple of events that we had in the fall, and it resonated very well both with customers and industry analysts as well, which is, listen, we believe that for ROI to stick, you need to have a seamlessness of AI into the core of what you do, into the flow of things. And that happens when the applications that you're using, particularly the class of applications we're in, which is sort of core, hardcore financials or supply chain, your HCM capabilities or your spend. Those are the applications that run your business, that create the data on top of which you need AI to run. And as those three things happen seamlessly and that AI is embedded in the flow of where you work, value gets realized. The more these things are bolted upon each other, like an application layer is separate, and somebody has figured out a separate data layer where you're throwing all the data, trying to harmonize, and then somebody else in the organization is trying to figure out AI on top of it, like it gets so splintered that the value becomes marginalized, if you will. So we've got three core beliefs here. That's one, which is a seamless app data AI layer really allows you to realize value, which otherwise would be very hard to go do. The other one is, listen, so this app data AI flywheel, right? It makes sense, but you have an app A here from one vendor, another app here from another vendor, and a third app here. Like how many of these disparate app data AI flywheels can work? Because ultimately then you're optimizing for the local, not for the global. And if you have to optimize for the global, then you have to go through the same complexity again, which is take the data out, throw it somewhere, have a bespoke AI layer, and then you run into the same value realization problem. So we believe the broadest context would create the biggest ROI in the value, which is if you have finance data, spend data, supply chain, HCM, front office, all harmonized with AI on top of it, that will generate the global maxima for you. So that's the second ingredient. And the third one is we believe AI has to start with people first. There's a lot of talk about agents, hundreds of agents, thousands of agents, in some cases, billions of agents, right? Now, the question is, how do you make sense of that today? It's people that run organizations, and most organizations have a human-in-the-loop policy anyway for AI. We have to empower the roles that are there to make them smarter, more productive, more efficient. And as they build confidence, then you get into the autonomous execution layer as well. So we believe that the framework to realize ROI from AI is pretty simple. The seamlessness, the breadth of the context, and as you focus on the individual, things happen. And that's what we see real life with our customers, and our customers seem to react positively to that as well.
So as a product guy, you're going to like this. Can you walk us through a use case of how this works, like according to plan? Like what is the ideal scenario where someone using SAP's AI tool is actually able to get value, or using SAP's tools with AI baked in is able to get value?
Yeah, no, so I'll give you a couple of examples, and I tend to be a little bit verbose, so I'm trying to keep myself short so we can cover more ground. So if I talk too much, Alex, let me know.
I'll let you know.
But as you can tell, this topic is obviously exciting. So let's start with finance. In finance, there's roles that exist that are on the accounts receivable side. There's controlling roles, and the construct exists. Those are the people that are running businesses today. And if you take accounts receivable or controlling, there are functions that they do in terms of dispute management or accruals management. So what we're doing is we're saying, hey, for our accounts receivable and our controlling colleagues, we're creating an AI assistant, a Joule assistant for accounts receivable or a Joule assistant for controlling. And what these assistants then have is n number of agents and capabilities underneath them. So for a controlling agent, they can go in and do accruals management. So they can reason over the data and the history, understand the patterns, predict based on those patterns what the next accrual should be, and propose that accrual for you. That could be a very laborious exercise at every month end or quarter end, but we provide that efficiency and that capability to reason over that data for people to be able to go. Dispute management is another one, that you've got a bunch of accounts receivable invoices that you need to be able to understand what's the best way to understand and resolve those disputes. Now, these capabilities ladder up to an assistant that makes that role 20% efficient to begin with. As we add more, it becomes 50% more efficient, 60%. Eventually, it will get to a place where you can say that, hey, most of the recommendations, 8 or 9 out of those recommendations that come out of Joule or AI, are ones that I just agreed to because they're actually the right recommendations at what I would do. And then you can move to autonomous to say, I might then change this agent to be able to continue to execute because I don't need to check every step. And then you get into an autonomous financial close, for instance, that goes through the steps once you have enough confidence and trust built in the people that are running it today. So this is sort of the laddering up of making the human efficient, smarter. As the trust builds in, you can allow the agents to run autonomously to get to an autonomous function, if you will. You can take that in finance. You can take that in customer service, where customers are doing that already, where a case comes in, you look at what the issue is, you reason over, you come up with a recommendation based on your knowledge base, you send the recommendation to the customer provides the feedback, you can close the case, and there you can take some percentage of your cases that are simpler and run it through this autonomous service execution or touchless process. So that's how I think it ladders up with real life scenarios that we're working to help land with our customers.
It's interesting because I think a lot of the conversation around AI has been hyping up the models and talking about how they're going to be these omniscient large language models that you throw a lot of data at and they'll figure it all out. And you don't really need much structure underneath. And what you're saying is, if I'm hearing you right, basically yeah, you can get an ROI from a large language model, but there needs to be a structure built in. Otherwise, it's going to, I guess, hallucinate and get things wrong and not do what you want. Is that the right read?
Yeah, I think that's the right read. That's one, right? And I think we need to be pragmatic, because that end state of everything is going to be run by agents, billions of agents. I mean, I think it's an unrealistic, hyped up end state right now that we're not ready to get to. And I think there's a lot of other people that are now saying the same things as well, that, hey, it's not going to be a year of agents, it's going to be a decade of agents, because it's going to take a little bit for us to sort of go figure out the accuracy, the trust, and the reliability on it. And we believe in the same thing, but we have to sort of go through those steps. And one of the things I like to sort of make fun of ourselves in some ways is, we're not going out there and announcing thousands of agents. And I think somebody came to me and said, oh, well, you guys just only announced this many agents. You could have sent an email. You didn't need a conference for it. But this is where our point of view is, listen, we want to do the stuff that's pragmatic, that's grounded, that's creating value, and not just the hype that sits on a shelf somewhere that nobody really gets any value from.
Right. SAP has made some very interesting choices on the technology side as well. I don't, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see SAP going out there and raising billions or $1 trillion in debt and working to train your own LLMs. So what is your philosophy in terms of, build your own large language models or work with the state of the art or work with the frontier labs? Talk through the strategy on that side a little bit.
Yeah, it's a hybrid strategy. So we early on, our strategy sort of was grounded in you can say predicting that the world of large language models is going to get commoditized anyway. You're going to see a better model come up every day, if you will, from that perspective. as the flywheel sort of takes effect, and we're seeing that. So we intentionally wanted to be both decoupled and agnostic of the large language model underneath, so we could use the best one for the best use case. And that's sort of the platform that we've built with our generative AI hub and our core AI that's available in Joule, that you can pick the right model for the use case to go build. Now, that was a clear strategy, that we're not going to go build our own large language model. Now, the thing that we are doing to complement that is we do take the right large language models and then sort of fine tune them with data that we have, either with consent from our customers or our application code base that isn't available in the public domain, to make sure that then we have a set of fine tuned models that when you interact with that fine tuned model that's built on one of the base models, that you get much higher, much better results, more accurate results, if you will. So that we're doing, and that we're doing in multiple domains, that makes our build tool far more aware of when you need to create an extension for an SAP application, or when you interact with the model with Ariba or S4, that it gets the right results, if you will, than a public model would, or a public model that you have to provide a lot of context as part of your natural language query to be able to get to the same answer. The third thing that we are doing, which we announced at Tech Ed a couple of weeks ago that we're super proud of, is our Rapid One model, which we are now taking the thing that we believe we uniquely have, which is the thousands of customers that have given us permission to use their aggregated anonymized data to build a fine-tuned sort of tabular model that allows us to do predictive modeling based on tabular numbers. Now, that as a foundational model on tabular data alongside a large language model based on text now creates some significant potential use cases that, again, are geared towards delivering ROI that makes sense for customers.
Okay, last one for you, Mohammed. Hype. A lot of hype in the AI world. Is it good or bad?
I think it's both. I mean, I would say it's both. I think I'll start with the good. And I think the good is, at least it is creating an awareness of the potential and the possibilities of what AI can bring. And it's leading to real conversations with customers to say, hey, how do we go apply it? Now, that's the good part of it. There's intention, there's willingness, and in some cases there's budgets, significant budgets, to say, how do we make that real? Now, the real part of it obviously isn't good, because there's so much hype and the reality doesn't hit. Then you go into a burst of a bubble, if you will, which we're starting to at least hear about in the news, if you will. So to me, that's the part that's not good. And that's where we, from an SAP perspective, always take a very pragmatic approach to say, hey, we don't want to go right up to the top of the hype cycle. We want to deliver stuff working with customers hand in hand to create that value, just to make sure that this journey that we're collectively on delivers results.
Well, Mohammed, look, it's always great to speak with you. I really appreciate your grounded expertise, shall we say, right? Telling us what's actually happening in the AI world and helping people know how to get real results from it. So it's always great to speak with you. You're always welcome.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Mohammed. And thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll be back on the feed with another video later this week.